Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well. Abby and I have chapter 10, which is called No Child is an Island. And essentially, this chapter is about addressing people in a child's life who may not understand stuttering as much as we would like them to, and how we can help those people learn about how they can help the child who stutters communicate effectively. Specifically, this chapter talks about how to work with parents, teachers, peers, and then how to manage teasing and bullying. So first I'm going to talk about how to work with parents. So the first part of working with parents is to check in with them to see what they need from us. The book states that before we can meaningfully address the ways parents can help their children, we must consider the needs of the parents themselves. Form 10A in the book, it can be a really good resource to check in with parents, and it allows parents to share information about their current status and their needs with respect to treatment. Next, the chapter talked about how parents need assurance that their child will be okay. We need to make sure that parents understand that their child can be okay and still stutter. Just like how stuttering acceptance is a big part of the therapy for the child, it also needs to be understood by their parents. Um, so, our three goals is for parents to understand that their child can learn to manage their stuttering so it doesn't have to have a negative impact on their ability to achieve their goals. It's possible for their child to speak freely even if they stutter. And also, their child can get to the point where stuttering does not cause anxiety, shame, or embarrassment. So, these changes in understanding stuttering may not come automatically for parents, just as it doesn't come automatically for children. One way we can focus on the overall goals and well being of the child is for you to ask the parents, assuming that your child does continue stuttering, what would you like their life to be like in 5 years? That was a question that the book had. Um, Most likely, the parents' answer will revolve around the overall life satisfaction of their child and not specifically on their fluency or their speech. When we show parents that our therapy is focused on those broader goals of improving their ability to communicate effectively and freely, this can kind of help ease their overall concern. Additionally, parents need to see that their child is making progress in therapy in terms of communicating more freely and effectively. To best do this, we want to ask the child to regularly explain what stuttering is, what happens with their speech mechanism when they stutter, what their speech management strategies are and how they're using them, how well the strategies work in different situations, when speaking situations are easier and when they're harder, and why, what things they do or don't do because of their stuttering. So, basically, the impact of stuttering on their lives, how they feel when they stutter, and how they feel when other people, including their parents, react negatively to their stuttering, and what changes they're experiencing in their speech, their reactions to their stuttering, and in their ability to communicate. So, if parents are kept well informed of progress, this will help them get in tune with the overall goals for helping their child improve their fluency, reactions to stuttering, and communication abilities. So, next, the book discusses what to do if a child's parents begins nagging them about using stuttering modification strategies. It can be hard for a parent to understand that it's not easy to use these strategies all the time. They may think that if the strategies make their child more fluent, why won't they use them all the time? And as we learned in class, when we practice using them, it's not very easy. It took a lot of concentrated effort and it involved a lot of thinking and planning while simultaneously speaking, so it's not an easy task. Um, we all know that it doesn't take a lot of repetition from your parents about something to feel like they're nagging you, which is the case here as well. Um, in order to help parents understand that it's not easy or possible to use these strategies all of the time, we can have them practice pseudo stuttering and use the strategy so that they can see for themselves, kind of like how we did in class. Additionally, we want parents to show that what they want their child to do, not just tell them. So if they want their child to use more easy starts, for example, then we can ask parents to show that they can use easy starts themselves and they can demonstrate that to their child. So, next, the book discussed how parents deliver praise to their child, and we kind of touched on this whenever we were talking about preschool stuttering, about how we need to be careful about how we give feedback because we don't want children to think that fluency equals good and stuttering equals bad. The book gave an example if a child was reading aloud or speaking and they were fluent, and the parent or teacher said, "You did so great at that." It may make the child wonder or feel like if they had stuttered, then it wouldn't have been a great job. Also, if people praise fluent speech in situations where the child wasn't actively using a fluency facilitating strategy, the child may not know what they did to earn the praise. This can kind of make it hard to duplicate whatever happened that made them have fluent speech. Um, so instead, if we praise the child on what they do instead of just on fluency, this can reinforce the idea that the child has control and can choose to modify their speech in order to speak more easily. Um, the book specifically says that we need to teach parents to praise the effort, not the outcome. Also, we don't want to praise the child's ability to use speaking strategy to only use speaking strategies. We can also praise their ability to accept stuttering, speak freely, and say what they want to say rather than avoiding speaking because of they have a fear of stuttering. Their ability to enter difficult situations, regardless of whether or not they may stutter. Their ability to manage physical tension during fluent and stuttered speech, and their ability to communicate successfully regardless of the amount of stuttering in their speech. Sorry. Um, or maybe like the amount of apprehension they might experience. Um, Doing this helps parents reinforce everything that the child is learning in therapy. So a tricky situation that may happen is a child may no longer need to receive intervention, but their parents want them to continue. This can be especially difficult in schools because you're obligated to accommodate the parents' wishes and keep the child in therapy, even if it's not what you judge is best for the child. For example, if the child has already achieved effective communication and has acceptance over their stuttering, there may there may not be anything else for the child to do in therapy except practice and refine their like stuttering modification strategies. Another situation is if a child no longer wants to continue therapy, and this can be because either their stuttering isn't a concern for them anymore, or if they have reached a plateau. Um, if that's the case, this can cause the child to have less motivation for therapy. And if they're being forced to continue therapy from their parents, this can cause an increased frustration for the child, which could also lead to a decrease in progress even further. Um, in these cases, it's recommended that you discuss with the parents about taking a break from therapy, possibly, and so that the parents don't feel like the child is just kind of being left with nothing. This is a great situation in which you can recommend joining a self help group. Okay, so next, the book talked about working with teachers. Um, so, a lot of the time, teachers can be left out of the loop when it comes to education about stuttering and what they can do to help their students who stutter. It's important to have a teacher as an ally because they will see the child more than you, and if they're educated correctly, they can give you a lot of useful information about how the child is doing in the classroom. A quote from the book that I really liked was, "A teacher who understands the nature of stuttering and stuttering treatment can be a strong ally for a child who stutters. The teacher can have a notable positive impact on the child's communicative, social, and academic success, both inside and outside of the classroom. When you put forth the effort to create this atmosphere, the child's stuttering treatment goals are more easily transferred to situations outside of the therapy room, and this helps you and the child achieve greater success in therapy." So, the three things we want teachers to understand are the nature of stuttering, including the specific behaviors exhibited by children who stutter, and in particular, the fact that stuttering varies from day to day and from situation to situation. Also, what's involved in stuttering therapy, including that the goals of therapy don't necessarily include perfect, fluent speech. And then also the importance of under the surface aspects of stuttering, including the child's feelings and beliefs about stuttering, as well as the signs that indicate that a child may be using avoidance behaviors. Teachers knowing these things about stuttering is important because it provides teachers with guidance on what to focus on when they're observing and interacting with their student who stutters. Um, it also teaches them that stuttering is more than just stuttering, um, and that in the classroom, the under the surface aspects of stuttering can lead to avoidance of participation. It allows the teacher to recognize the child's efforts at improving their communication as a whole rather than only focusing on the number of times they stutter. This results in more opportunities for generalization and maintenance of enhanced communication skills in the classroom. So, the book discusses 4 common concerns and questions from teachers about their students who stutter. And those are: I don't have enough time to let the child talk in class. What about answering questions and reading aloud? Should they just skip oral reports? And what about recess, lunch, and the bus? So, the first one is very common because teachers mainly report concerns about time constraints in the classroom, and they don't know if they can give their student who stutters the time to answer a question or read aloud if they are kind of pressed for time. Um, so, when discussing this with a teacher, you first want to validate their concerns about time, and you can say something like, "It's true, children who stutter may need a longer time to read aloud than other children." Next, you want to brainstorm ideas with the teacher that allows them to have the opportunity, that allows the child to have the opportunity to participate in the classroom. The book gave a few examples. So, one is that the teacher may just need to know in advance that an activity may take extra time. Um, and so, this can allow them to plan for that activity to take extra time. The teacher can also call on their student who stutters during activities where there's less time constraints. Um, and then when making these modifications, it's important for the teacher to talk to the child about this and reassure them that they can take the time that they need to participate in the classroom. Doing this helps the child so that they don't begin to avoid participating due to being afraid of taking too much time in class. So, another concern for teachers is that they don't know if they should call on students who stutter to answer a question or read aloud because they don't want the student to feel pressure or embarrassment. The book says that teachers rarely ask about ask the child how they would like a situation like this to be handled. So it's important to help make that conversation happen. Um, a few ideas the book listed is the teacher doing random selection so that the child doesn't have increased tension as they're waiting for their turn in like a predetermined order. Um, the teacher can do a random selection to decrease this anticipation and pressure. Another strategy is allow the child to go first or last, whatever they prefer, to decrease anticipation and pressure, or prepare and practice before their turn arrives if they want to go last. The teacher and student can also come up with like a signal that the child can use on the spot when they decide they want to participate. This decreases pressure and anxiety because the child is in control of when they feel comfortable participating. Another thing you can do is a tag team where the student is like partnered with another student who shares partial responsibility for the discussion. And this kind of allows the child who stutters to know that they will not be alone when trying to talk, which can help to decrease anxiety. The teacher can also do a popcorn selection um, in order to let the children in the classroom choose who reads next. This may not be the best strategy to use if the child wants to know what order they are going, um, but it could be useful if the child prefers a random order. The strategy also allows all children to participate in classroom discussions. Um, when talking with this about a teacher, it's just important that the teacher gets feedback from the child about what they prefer. Um, so, next is should they just skip oral reports? So, when it comes to oral reports, some teachers wonder if they should just let their students who stutter skip this type of assignment. Um, Children who stutter should have the same opportunities as all other children in the classroom, and they should not automatically be exempted from any activity simply due to the fact that they stutter. Um, at the same time, teachers must be flexible with making modifications or accommodations to help the child succeed. Possible ways to do this are allow the child to give the report in a small group setting, um, give the report first or second to minimize buildup of fear and apprehension, give the report with another child, eliminate or extend limits to minimize time pressures, allow the student to practice in front of the SLP or the teacher before facing the class. And then only for the most severe cases should the teacher allow the student to complete a different type of assignment that still displays that the child has knowledge on the subject. Um, Overall, we want the student to participate as much as they can. It's important for teachers to not assume that any student who stutters will want these adaptations. Some kids are comfortable doing the report just like every other student is doing it without any adaptations. So we don't want to just make an assumption that they are going to need this. The book says we need to set our goals high and then provide the support they may need to achieve those goals, which I really liked. So the last concern discusses that teachers are sometimes worried about times such as recess, lunch, or the bus when they may not have much contact with the child. This highlights the fact that we can educate and collaborate with all of the school staff about stuttering, not just the child's teacher. To do this, we can provide basic information about stuttering, how to communicate with children who stutter, and any suggestions about how to manage problems that may occur. Supporting an open line of communication between staff and the classroom teacher will help you deal with these situations if any problems arise. Okay, that is all for part 1, and Abby is taking over part 2. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so the second part of the chapter talked about peers. And this is important because the primary audience shifts from family to peers, and peers become more involved. And although a lot of children might have issues that maybe aren't related to their stutter, in those cases, it's very appropriate to talk to other professionals. However, we are the professionals who are best equipped to help them address issues they face when those issues are related to stuttering. And then in this part, we're going to talk about educating peers, teasing and bullying, and helping them advocate for themselves. So educating others is a really important process for decreasing bullying, because the more we know about it, or the more children know about it, the less likely they are to engage in inappropriate behaviors. This might include writing a letter explaining what it is, writing a book report on a character who stutters, giving a classroom presentation, interviewing someone, inviting a family member who stutters, or using assignments given in class to talk about stuttering in general. The one that the book focused on was just classroom presentations, which allow the child who stutters to specifically address stuttering, and it educates other children. So although we want them to do this independently, it's important that we're involved in the planning and practicing process. This is considered the pinnacle for desensitization, so it's really important when it comes to decreasing fear around stuttering. We want to start by discussing the goals they want to achieve. These could be specific or general. Next, we're going to help them prepare an outline for the presentation and brainstorm activities. This could be having people pseudo stutter, or maybe role playing a bullying scenario. And then we finally want to help them practice their talk. We want to help them sample questions and problem solve for anything that might come up during the presentation. A well-planned and carefully prepared presentation is always a positive experience for both the child who stutters and his classmates. The book noted that there have been some negative experiences, however, those were typically related to lack of preparation. The next thing I talked about was understanding bullying. This is really important because people who stutter are more likely to be bullied and less likely to be equipped to deal with bullying because of their difficulty with verbal responses. It's important to know the difference between teasing and bullying. Teasing involves comments that aren't intended to hurt the child, and teasing in itself isn't a problem as long as it's not intended to be hurtful. A lot of children who stutter have actually had comfort in being teased, or how to tease, because it's not necessarily a hurtful thing. Bullying, however, involves comments that are intended to cause embarrassment or pain and seeks to exploit weaknesses in victims. They often increase their effort when they hit the mark. For a person who stutters, maybe a bully notices their stutter and notices that evokes a emotional reaction, and so then they're going to increase their efforts. Regardless, it's important to know that bullying is never acceptable and nobody deserves it. Children who are bullied are more likely to have difficulty with things like self-esteem, confidence, and social interactions. And it's important for us as SLPs and clinicians to work to ensure that they know that people have differences, and they aren't bad, they're just differences. And those differences cannot be subject to hurtful words or actions. It's also important that we know that as like parents and clinicians and advocating for the people that we serve, that attitude comes from the top, and it starts with the parents and teachers. It also talked about why bullies bully. It mentioned that a lot of times it's because of they have a lack of tolerance for differences in other people. Again, noticing that differences are, they don't notice the differences are just differences. They view them as like bad. And it can also be caused by their own low self-esteem. So because of that, they tend to target children who seem weaker than themselves and who will react emotionally to the teasing. For those who stutter, it's important to understand that they are not to blame, meaning that the people who stutter are not to blame. And that in itself can empower them and shift that power balance. When it comes to putting an end to bullying, the book mentioned that the reasons that bullying is happening matter less than the manner in which the people handle it. So it listed a few different ways to do that. One was character education curricula, in which students are taught how to respond to bullying and how to treat differences with respect. It also mentioned literature to help children who stutter. So, for example, the National Stuttering Awareness Association, or not National Stuttering Awareness, National Stuttering Association came out with a poster that listed differences in people and said that it was like no laughing matter. Regardless, we have to get involved if we notice bullying, but how we do that depends on the child and the severity and seriousness of the situation. Because we as clinicians and parents and teachers are not always going to be able to be there for the child. So our goal is to provide them with a variety of strategies for dealing with bullying and to empower them to handle situations to the best of their ability. We need to be prepared for this to be a very collaborative effort between child, parents, and teachers so that we create a positive and child-directed support system. In order to work with them to minimize bullying, we can help them understand that they can't directly change the actions of another person, but they can change the way they respond. So our goal is to help them select responses that decrease the likelihood of the continued bullying. And all in all, as with a lot of stuttering therapy, our foundation is to help them become more accepting of their stuttering. As mentioned before, the people who bully others tend to rely on that emotional reaction. So the less emotion they show, the less likely it is to continue. We also want to teach strategies for how to respond when it occurs. And we want to explore different responses to bullying by saying what we feel or being able to let them say what they feel without judgment. For example, if a student says that he really wants to physically hit a bully, we need to make sure that he's able to talk about that reaction, and then we can guide him to a more appropriate response. On the other hand, if a child just says that they would rather walk away, we don't want to view them as like a wimp or make it seem like they aren't taking control of the situation. We need to remember that verbal comebacks might be hard for them because of the stuttering. So that's why the strategies that they need should be selected by the child and not us. They should make them feel good about themselves and how they handle situations. And they should be viewed along a hierarchy, and they're meant to diffuse and not escalate situations. You'll notice in the next two slides that I talk about nonverbal and verbal responses. Nonverbal responses would be a good place to start, and then you can work your way up the hierarchy to more verbal and direct responses. Indirect and nonverbal responses are intended to protect the child from bullying and remove them from situations. Examples include asking for help. It's really important to, in this strategy, to talk about the difference between tattling and telling. Tattling is intentionally getting another person in trouble. Telling is just telling a person that you have a problem and that you need help solving that problem. It's when teachers and supervisors will watch over certain situations to protect the child. You can also ignore self-talk, which is when a child would walk away while reminding themselves of a positive message, such as, I did really good today. I can handle this. There's protective shield, which is when you just imagine there's a bubble around you that makes the hurtful words and actions bounce off. And then there's also ignore, imagine, and talk, which is when you would walk away while imagining you got to tell the bully exactly what you wanted to say, and then you would go and talk to someone trusted about what you wanted to say. And I feel like we've probably all done this at some point in our lives where you're like, oh man, really wish I would have said that. Like, I'll show him. So a lot of these can be generalized to, I think, ourselves and how we handle situations. And also when working with other kids with other communication disorders, I feel like that's a population in general that is more likely to be bullied. And so these strategies might help a wide range of children. There's also verbal responses, which are more direct. They are designed to deflect criticism in a way that leads to reduction of bullying. It's not used to hurt the bully. Instead, we want to just like let them know that their words don't hurt. I've listed some examples below, such as agreeing with them, asking them a question, reflecting the comment, using an I message, taking it as a compliment, walking away with a purpose, saying something that's hard to respond to, and using humor. The next part talked about is he the only one who stutters. So it listed some statistics from ASHA, and then the perception based off the ASHA study was that it's considered low incidence, but really 2/3 of SLPs like have people who stutter on their caseload. So we want to change this perception and reduce the stigma and shame that is often experienced by children who stutter. So in schools, we can group children together in therapy, we can group children together in social events, and we can provide them opportunities to connect with others outside of school. These are all really important because they provide that social support system that other students might need to be able to relate experiences, and maybe they can take strategies from others. Therapy, grouping them together in therapy would just be like within the school system. Social events would be outside of the school system, so it's not really related to goals, but more related to socializing and social interaction. And then that third one, providing opportunities outside of school, would be incorporating the use of email or closely monitored social media to help students connect to one another. There's also neighborhoods. A lot of times parents might say, oh, well, my kid's the only one in the neighborhood who stutters. First, validate their feelings. Obviously, it's totally normal for them to have concerns about their child's struggles. What we can do as clinicians is we can put them in touch with other children who stutter within the local region or even the country. And then also encourage parents to meet parents of other children who stutter. Again, just reinforcing that support system. It also talked about siblings and extended family. It mentioned in the book that although siblings and extended family can be a great source of support, they can also be a source of frustration and bullying if they are not educated. So our goal as a clinician is to diligently educate them about stuttering and appropriate or inappropriate ways of responding to those communication difficulties. We can educate them on what stuttering is, what therapy can and cannot do to help. For example, we want them to know that changing speech isn't easy and it doesn't cure stuttering. But we might also explain some of the coping mechanisms or coping strategies that are beneficial. And then we also want to talk about the do's and don'ts when speaking with someone who stutters. So maybe they could compile a list of helpful and unhelpful responses. The book, I just wanted to briefly mention what the book said. This is kind of a summary of what I mentioned in the previous slide. But just that the value of self-help and stuttering groups. So the biggest thing is that support system, and it provides hope and encouragement, and it helps to prepare children for long-term success by showing them that it is possible for them to maintain the changes they make in therapy and incorporate those changes throughout their lives. The last thing the chapter talked about was helping the children to advocate for themselves, because becoming empowered helps them to counter that sense of victimization. It helps them realize that they can improve their speech, face their fears about speaking, communicate effectively, and positively affect the environment in which they live. It kind of goes back to the PowerPoint that we talked about with locus of control and feeling that you have the ability to change yourself. So some specific areas of empowerment that the book listed were understanding, speaking, and stuttering. This would be learning about the process of speaking so they can better understand what they're doing when they stutter. It's hard to change what you don't understand, so knowledge is a necessary first step for helping them learn how to manage their stutter long term. It also helps to know why. They need to understand the rationale for all of the strategies they learn in therapy, and then after they learn the rationale, they can then select the ones that work best for them. It helps them to think critically and actively engage in problem-solving activities to determine their own best practices in dealing with their stuttering. It also talked about increasing self-confidence. A child who stutters must learn to take risks if he wishes to improve his communication skills. And the only way that they can take those risks is if they have the self-confidence to handle the outcomes. Um, Increasing self-confidence can also help them to advocate for themselves and educate others about stuttering. It also talked about knowing that it's okay even if they stutter. They need to learn to validate themselves and remind themselves that it's okay and that it's okay to stutter. Even people who don't stutter have normal disfluencies. So even if society and the environment don't always give that message, it's important for them to internalize the fact that they're okay by demonstrating our belief in their worth and value. The next thing I talked about was utilizing resources and support. Um, Although we do want them to be able to use these strategies independently, it's important for them to know that they still have a support system. And so they can take advantage of resources like support groups, literature, and allies like teachers and clinicians, which will help them learn to face stuttering successfully throughout their lives. The last thing I talked about was finding their own voice. The quote that I liked from the book here, it said, um, that when a child knows what he has to say is important enough for him to say it, even if he stutters, then he has learned an important lesson that will help him to decrease the impact of stuttering on his life. So just the idea that even if you stutter, your voice is important and that you matter. That will help them to deal with their experiences of success and failure in dealing with their stuttering. Again, our job is to help them develop the tools they need to achieve that success independently. And some tools that were included in the book would be having that solid understanding, having appropriate speech management strategies, having good communication skills, having the ability to advocate for themselves and educate others, having a strong self-concept, problem solving to critically evaluate situations, and having courage and self-confidence to put your skills into use. So a brief summary of what we talked about is basically just addressing strategies for helping people in the children's environment, which would be the parents, teachers, and peers. And yes, that's pretty much it. It's important to address the specific needs of other individuals in their life, and it's also important to educate other individuals about their stuttering and what they're learning in speech therapy so they can become active and supportive therapeutic partners. I hope everybody is doing well. I know these are unprecedented times and it's a little stressful for all of us, but our program is very supportive, and if anybody ever needs anything, I am always here.